federal government is taking its most aggressive steps yet against Norfolk Southern following the train derailment in East Palestine. The Environmental Protection Agency used its authority on Tuesday to force the company to do a full cleanup around the disaster zone. If the company fails to do so, the EPA will undertake the cleanup and then charge Norfolk Southern triple the cost. Here's EPA Administrator Michael Regan.
In no way, shape, or form will Norfolk Southern get off the hook for the mess that they created. This order represents one of EPA's strongest authorities to hold a company accountable for jeopardizing a community's health and safety.
According to Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, 4,600 yards of contaminated soil and more than 1 million gallons of contaminated water have been removed. But the derailment site is still very toxic, particularly the soil under the train tracks. Trains are running through the town again, kicking up all that toxic dirt. Norfolk Southern has been accused of prioritizing the reopening of the tracks over a thorough cleanup. Governor DeWine said the rails will have to be removed eventually to access the contaminated soil. In the nearby state of Pennsylvania, Governor Josh Shapiro accused Norfolk Southern of mismanagement during the crisis and of sharing inaccurate information with the public. He said his office made a criminal referral against the company to the Pennsylvania Attorney General, and the state of Ohio is pursuing its own criminal investigation. Meanwhile, former President Trump is expected to arrive in East Palestine later today, where he'll pretend to care about the affected population. What he won't mention is all the deregulation that took place during his administration that helped the rail companies become extremely profitable while neglecting track safety and the health of their own workers. Anyway, remember when Trump visited Puerto Rico after a catastrophic hurricane and then just started tossing rolls of paper towel at people like he was Michael Jordan? Expect something similar in East Palestine. There's simply no one more ill-equipped to deal with human suffering than Donald Trump. Although Pete Buttigieg is pretty high up on the list too. Federal law gives internet platforms immunity from being sued for the content that's put on their platforms by third parties. That's stipulated in Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, passed in 1996. But how far does that immunity stretch? When a company starts actively promoting that third-party content, does it lose its immunity? That's the question before the Supreme Court this week in the case of Gonzalez versus Google. The plaintiffs are the family of Nohemi Gonzalez, who was killed in the 2015 Paris terrorist attacks. They're suing Google over its subsidiary YouTube's algorithmically boosted ISIS recruitment videos. Family says that Google violated anti-terror laws. Google and a slew of other tech companies argue that no, they can't be sued because they are still immune under Section 230, and that the algorithms that boost certain content are simply organizational tools that any website must use to make them functional. They warn against weakening Section 230, which an attorney for Google claimed is a statute that's foundational to today's internet. If Google is found not to be immune under it due to its algorithmically boosted videos, then that would open the door to an avalanche of lawsuits against other tech companies and change how content is posted and moderated on the internet. A lower court has already sided with Google on the matter, and during oral arguments on Tuesday, the Supreme Court justices appeared hesitant to overturn that ruling. Instead, they suggested this is a matter best left to Congress to clarify. Here was Justice Elena Kagan summing up why the court is ill-equipped to weigh in here.
Every other industry has to internalize the costs of its conduct. Why is it that the tech industry gets a pass? A little bit unclear. On the other hand, we're a court. We really don't know about these things. These are not like the 9 greatest experts on the internet.
Okay, fair enough, but you don't need to be an expert in the internet to know why tech companies use algorithms to boost certain content. It keeps eyes on the website longer by feeding people material they might enjoy or might even get mad at, which generates engagement and ultimately improves profits. But now, tech companies want to ensure that they are immune from lawsuits when those algorithms feed people harmful content, whether it's videos that radicalize viewers to commit terrorism or videos that encourage teenagers to develop eating disorders. And it looks like they're poised to keep those protections. Big tech wins again. Supreme Court is also set to hear arguments today in a related case that involves Twitter. In this one, too, the family of a terrorist victim is suing the company, alleging that it knew ISIS was using its platform and did not act aggressively enough to stop it, thus violating statutes against aiding and abetting terrorist organizations. In that case, it's not an issue of whether or not Twitter has immunity, but whether or not Twitter's actions go far enough to be defined as substantial assistance to a terrorist organization and thus liable for legal action. A victory for Twitter would have a knock on effect on the Google case, because even if Google is found to not be immune under Section 230, that doesn't mean its boosted videos rise to the level of aiding terrorist organizations. And finally, the landlords are spooked. They're taking self-defense classes out in LA. Capital in Maine reported on what's described as active violence emergency training courses provided to property owners. It's hosted by the city's top landlord interest group, the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. According to the news outlet, the 2.5-hour self-defense class covers protection from irate tenants, transients, and the other hazards of life in the private housing business. There's instruction on how to stop life-threatening bleeding, maintain 360 degrees of awareness, and take cover from bullets and disarm shooters. But looking closer at the program and what motivated it, it appears this is less about self-defense and more about class war training. Creators of the program admit they don't have any data to suggest that landlords are facing any greater threat than before, but the creation of the program does coincide with increased violence and harassment by landlords against tenants. The courses started last year when an eviction moratorium prevented landlords from tossing tenants out on the streets. So what these assholes did instead was harass tenants until they left on their own. Capital in Maine cited data from LA's Eviction Defense Network, which showed that in 2020, complaints from tenants that their landlords were harassing them increased by 352% over the prior year. Well, if the landlords are learning the ways of Kung Fu, I say we learn the ways of Mao.